The night is quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ribs and forces you to confront the one truth you've spent years avoiding. You don't fear loneliness, you crave it. And that craving burns hotter than most people's desire for love, approval, or belonging. It unsettles you sometimes, doesn't it, this strange magnetism towards solitude? While the world screams for attention, validation, noise, you slip away into your own silence like someone returning to a forbidden sanctuary. A place where the rest of humanity seems distant, blurred, almost unreal. Yet deep down, a whisper haunts you. What does this say about you? What secret is hiding beneath this hunger for space, for quiet, for isolation so profound it borders on holy? There's an unspoken paradox here. Society tells you that being alone is a red flag, a symptom of sadness or social failure. But you feel more alive in the depths of your own company. It's as if solitude sharpens you, awakens you, strips the world of its illusions and exposes truths others are too frightened to see. Still, a tension lingers. If solitude is so sacred, why does it sometimes feel like both your refuge and your curse? Why does stepping into silence feel like stepping into clarity, and yet, at times, into danger? You sense that your preference for being alone is not a flaw, but a signal. A clue pointing towards something rare, something powerful, something most people never develop because they're too distracted by the noise of their own lives. But here's the question that cuts deeper than the rest, the one you've tried not to ask yourself. What makes you so different from them? And what is the cost of being this different? Because the truth is, while others drown in togetherness, you navigate the hidden corridors of your mind. You explore the dark corners. You ask the questions most people avoid. You feel the weight of existence press against you, not to crush you, but to shape you into someone sharper, more aware, more awake. But awareness comes at a price. And you can feel that price lurking at the edges of your solitude. So before you continue, before you uncover the rare traits buried in your preference for aloneness, you must confront the great question. Is your solitude a calling, or a warning? A sign of inner strength, or a quiet fracture forming beneath the surface of your life? Everything that follows depends on your willingness to look deeper. The truth is unsettling. Your desire to be alone did not appear out of nowhere. It wasn't a random personal quirk, nor a simple preference. It grew from something deeper, something ancient within the psyche that most people never confront. Carl Jung once wrote that loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. You've felt that, haven't you? Not the ache of being by yourself, but the ache of being unseen among others. Most people drown themselves in constant interaction because they fear what they might discover in silence. They fear the shadows within their own minds. But you, whether intentionally or instinctively, stepped into that shadowed territory, and something unexpected happened. You found clarity there. But clarity has a cost. Because once you begin to see the world as it is, not as people pretend it to be, you also begin to see the fractures in society that others are conditioned to ignore. Here lies the hidden problem. Your preference for solitude is not merely about comfort. It is a rebellion against a world that demands conformity, noise, and emotional uniformity. Nietzsche warned of the herd, the collective instinct that pressures individuals to think, feel, and desire the same things. Most people surrender to it. They stay close to the group because it protects them from existential confrontation. But you broke away, even if quietly. Even if unintentionally. And breaking away changes everything. Solitude becomes your laboratory, your cathedral, where you examine the machinery of your mind without the distortions of social expectation. You see what others refuse to see. How people cling to shallow conversations to avoid depth. How society rewards distraction over introspection. How identity is often a collage of borrowed beliefs. How fear, not connection, holds most relationships together. This awareness isolates you, yes, but it also awakens you. Psychologists call this differentiation of self, the ability to hold your own identity, your own emotional boundaries, without merging into the chaos of others. Few people develop this skill. It requires confronting discomfort, confronting truth, confronting your own internal contradictions. And contradictions are at the heart of this entire issue. You feel connected to the world on a deeper level, yet disconnected from its surface. You crave peace, yet wrestle with thoughts that refuse to stay quiet. You understand others more than they understand themselves, yet you remain a mystery to them. You stand apart, not because you cannot belong, but because belonging often demands the sacrifice of authenticity. Aldous Huxley argued that the modern world distracts people from themselves, keeping them spinning in circles of stimulation so they never pause long enough to face the abyss within. You, however, have stared into that abyss, and instead of recoiling, you found a strange familiarity in it. But this is where the roots thicken. Because the same forces that sharpen you also separate you. The same insights that free you also bind you to solitude. And the deeper you go, the more dangerous and transformative the consequences become. The effects of your solitude run deeper than you realize. They seep into your decisions, your relationships, your worldview, quietly shaping a life that looks ordinary from the outside but feels radically different from within. While others drift through the world on autopilot, you move through it like someone reading a secret script beneath the visible text. But this clarity comes with invisible consequences. Because the moment you began preferring your own company, you also began stepping outside the psychological frameworks that guide most human behavior. You became harder to sway, harder to manipulate, harder to distract. In a society built on noise, someone who thrives in silence is dangerous. This is why your solitude often triggers discomfort in others. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because your presence exposes something fragile in them, the fear of their own unexamined mind. You've probably noticed it, how people sometimes project assumptions onto you. You're too quiet. You're distant. You should socialize more. You're overthinking. They think they're diagnosing you, but in truth, they're revealing themselves. They're describing the prison they live in, the prison of constant stimulation, constant approval seeking, constant avoidance of inner work. Your solitude becomes a mirror they don't want to look into. But there's another consequence, one far more subtle and far more dangerous. Because the more you withdraw from the world, the more attuned you become to patterns that others never see. You begin noticing cognitive biases operating in real time, the shortcuts and blind spots that govern human choices. Confirmation bias, guiding people to seek only what reassures them. Social proof, convincing them that popularity equals truth. The spotlight effect, making them believe everyone is watching and judging. The illusion of control, soothing their fear of uncertainty. Emotional contagion, pulling them into moods that aren't even their own. But while others are carried by these forces, you stand outside them, observing. And once you see the machinery behind human behavior, you can't unsee it. You recognize the scripts behind conversations, the unconscious motives, the hidden fears. This awareness isolates you even more. Because when you see how manufactured most human behavior is, connection becomes complicated. You crave authenticity, but authenticity is rare. You crave depth, but depth intimidates. You crave truth, but truth disrupts the fragile equilibrium people cling to. Neurologically, solitude rewires you too. Studies suggest that people who spend significant time alone develop higher activity in the default mode network, the brain system tied to self-reflection, imagination, and meaning-making. This strengthens your ability to form independent thoughts, but it also makes you more susceptible to existential questioning. You start asking, why am I here? What is my purpose? What do relationships actually mean? Is society built on truth or convenience? These questions elevate you, but they also detach you from the everyday world. You begin moving through life as if you're peeling back layers others didn't even know existed. And here lies the biggest unseen consequence of all. You may be evolving faster than the environment around you. Your mind stretches, expands, awakens, but your world remains the same, forcing you into a quiet tension between who you are becoming and the structures that cannot contain you. This tension can push you toward despair, or toward transformation. At some point, the tension becomes unbearable. You feel it, a subtle pressure, as if the world is trying to pull you back into its orbit while your inner self keeps drifting outward, towards something larger, something truer. This is the moment when quiet solitude transforms into something else entirely: rebellion. Not rebellion in the dramatic, cinematic sense. A rebellion of awareness. A rebellion of choosing differently in a world that depends on people choosing predictably. You break free the moment you realize that your solitude isn't a retreat, it's a weapon. The first act of rebellion is reclaiming authorship of your own mind. You stop allowing the world to dictate what should matter to you. You stop giving your time, your attention, your emotional bandwidth to everything that screams for it. Instead, you decide consciously what deserves your energy. This alone sets you apart, because most people live in reaction. You begin living in intention. This shift is not comfortable, but it is transformative. Nietzsche believed that becoming who you truly are requires a phase of isolation. He saw solitude not as a withdrawal, but as a furnace, a place where the fragmented self melts and reforms into a unified, powerful whole. When you step into your solitude willingly, you undergo your own forging. But rebellion also means challenging the internal narratives you inherited. For years, you may have believed that being alone made you difficult, strange, or broken. Yet when you step back, when you look with a clearer eye, you see that solitude has been your greatest teacher, one our society simply doesn't know how to understand. So you begin rewriting your inner language. Instead of, "I'm distant," you say, "I'm discerning." Instead of, "I withdraw," you say, "I protect my energy." Instead of, "I don't fit in," you say, "I don't dilute myself to belong." This is rebellion in its purest form, refusing to apologize for your depth. But to break free fully, you must also reconnect on your own terms. Not through forced interactions or shallow social rituals, but through authentic resonance, with ideas, with art, with mentors, with rare individuals who speak the same psychological and philosophical language you do. Solitude sharpens you, but connection refines you. The key is choosing connections that expand your consciousness instead of shrinking it. Frankl taught that meaning is not found in comfort, but in responsibility, specifically the responsibility to become who you are capable of being. Breaking free means embracing this responsibility. Not shrinking from your own potential. Not dimming your insight to make others comfortable. Not pretending to be small simply because the world fears people who can see through it. Rebellion also requires embodied presence. You stop drifting through life mentally and start inhabiting your decisions fully. You express your boundaries clearly. You no longer tolerate relationships built on convenience or expectation. You choose solitude when it strengthens you and connection when it aligns with truth. And in doing so, you reclaim something most people never touch: self-sovereignty. And once you taste sovereignty, even for a moment, the world can no longer pull you back into unconsciousness. This rebellion, quiet, internal, unwavering, paves the path for the final revelation, the realization that will transform everything you thought you understood about yourself, your solitude, and your purpose. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when everything you've wrestled with suddenly aligns. The solitude, the misunderstandings, the inner conflicts, the questions that kept circling back like persistent shadows, they all snap into clarity. And what you discover is not a comforting truth, but an electrifying one. Your preference for solitude was never about isolation. It was about evolution. You weren't withdrawing from the world, you were outgrowing it. The signs were there long before you recognized them. The way shallow conversations drained you. The way crowded rooms made your mind drift to deeper realms. The way the noise of daily life felt abrasive to a sensitivity you couldn't explain. The way truth called to you more loudly than approval ever did. And now you finally understand why. Your mind has been sculpted for depth, not distraction. For awareness, not performance. For authenticity, not conformity. This realization hits with both relief and responsibility. Because once you see that your solitude is a sign of inner maturity, you can no longer treat it as a flaw or anomaly. You begin to realize you were living on a different frequency all along, a frequency tuned to meaning, insight, and introspection. But here is the ultimate truth: the one most people never discover. Solitude is not the opposite of connection. It is the foundation of meaningful connection. You had to step away from the world to see it clearly. You had to separate from others to understand how to truly relate to them. You had to lose the noise to hear your own voice. All your life, you thought you were distancing yourself. But what you were really doing was refining yourself, filtering out the illusions, the shadows, the internal scripts that weren't yours. You weren't becoming harder. You were becoming sharper. You weren't disconnecting. You were discerning. And when you begin to see yourself this way, something powerful awakens within you, a sense of purpose. Not the grand, dramatic purpose people chase, but a quieter one, an inner directive guiding you toward authenticity, truth, and contribution. You realize that your solitude gave you clarity, but that clarity is meant to be used. To see differently is a gift, to act differently is a responsibility. You begin to understand that the 5 rare traits hidden beneath your aloneness were never burdens, they were indicators of potential. Heightened self-awareness. Deep emotional independence. Exceptional intuition. Resistance to societal conditioning. A mind wired for meaning over pleasure. These traits isolate you from the world, right until the moment you learn how to wield them. Because the final realization is this: you were never meant to live on the surface. You were meant to carve pathways into the unseen. Your solitude sharpened your vision so that you could become a guide, not for the masses, but for those who quietly sense there is more to life than the scripts they were handed. People who, like you once were, stand on the edge of awakening but fear the silence that comes with it. You now understand that the silence is not empty. It is full of direction, full of truth, full of the self you had been searching for all along. And as this realization settles into you, another emerges, softer yet more profound. You are no longer alone in your solitude. It has become your companion, your compass, your strength. Now your life opens in a new direction, not outward toward noise, but inward toward mastery. And from that mastery you step back into the world, not as someone lost in the crowd, but as someone who finally understands why you walked alone for so long.